Juliana Redding was found brutally murdered. Prosecutors would later say they had never seen a crime scene with this much DNA evidence before. Juliana Morin Redding was born on October 25, 1986, the same birthday as Pablo Picasso. Her mother Patricia often said she knew from the beginning she had given birth to someone extraordinary, a masterpiece. Juliana grew up in Tucson, Arizona, in a close Catholic family alongside her younger brother Patrick. Her parents, Patricia and Greg Redding, raised their children in a home filled with discipline, warmth, and ambition. From the beginning, Juliana stood out. She was strikingly beautiful, confident without seeming arrogant, and people noticed her immediately. Even as a child, other kids naturally gravitated toward her. She made friends effortlessly and carried herself with unusual confidence for someone so young. One of her favorite things to do was collect business cards and carry them around in her great-grandfather's black leather briefcase. She would proudly tell people she planned to become a businesswoman someday. Looking back, it's strangely sweet because even then she already seemed certain she was heading somewhere important. Her grandmother sometimes brought her to executive meetings, and Juliana fit perfectly into rooms filled with adults. She was calm, observant, comfortable being noticed. At Salpointe Catholic High School in Tucson, she threw herself into everything. She played golf for 4 years and helped her team rank first in the state during her senior year. She also participated in track and field, soccer, drama club, student council, and the recycling club. Teachers and classmates remembered her as someone who genuinely loved life, and that energy spread naturally to the people around her. In 2005, she was selected as a Tucson Symphony debutante, something that reflected the image she projected, poised, elegant, and confident. But beneath all those polished accomplishments was someone still trying to build a future for herself. After graduating high school, Juliana moved to California and enrolled at Santa Monica College to study communications. Around the same time, she signed with a modeling agency and began working part-time jobs as a hostess and waitress while pursuing modeling opportunities. Things started moving quickly for her. She landed product shoots, music videos, and promotional modeling jobs that reportedly paid around $3,000 each. She rented a one-bedroom apartment on Centinela Avenue near the beach in Santa Monica and slowly began creating an independent life for herself. At just 18 years old, she also earned a small acting role in an independent 2005 film called Kathy T. It wasn't a major breakthrough, but it felt like the beginning of something larger. Then, in early 2007, her life shifted in a direction nobody expected. While working at a restaurant in Santa Monica, Juliana met Dr. Munir Uwaydah, a wealthy Lebanese-American physician who operated a large medical business across Southern California. He offered her a job as a medical assistant, and the salary was far beyond what she had been earning before. Soon she could afford things like a Range Rover and a far more luxurious lifestyle. At some point, the relationship between Juliana and Uwaydah became romantic. She moved into his Beverly Hills home, and he showered her with gifts and attention. But there was a serious problem. Uwaydah was married and had children. When Juliana's father Greg learned about the relationship, he immediately warned his daughter to leave. He believed the man was dangerous. Moments like that always feel heavier in hindsight because they often seem small until everything falls apart later. Juliana listened to her father. She ended the relationship, moved back into her Santa Monica apartment, returned to school, and continued working. From the outside, it looked like she had moved on, but one connection remained. Juliana had introduced her father Greg to Dr. Uwaydah, and that decision would eventually pull the entire family into something much darker. Santa Monica, California, March 15, 2008. Juliana's bungalow on Centinela Avenue sat on a quiet residential street. It looked safe. Bars covered the windows, and the front door required a key to enter. Former prosecutor Alan Jackson later described it as the last place a young woman would ever expect danger to already be waiting inside. But that night, someone was there before Juliana arrived home. Investigators believe the killer entered the apartment shortly before 10 p.m. What followed was violent. The attack moved through the apartment in a brutal struggle. Furniture was knocked over. Objects were broken. Nearly every surface in the home captured traces of what happened. Juliana fought desperately to survive. Her head was slammed against the floor hard enough to leave severe injuries. Her throat was crushed during the attack. Investigators later found her own DNA underneath her fingernails, evidence that she had clawed at her attacker's hands while trying to pull them away from her neck. It's one of the most heartbreaking details in the case, because it shows she was conscious and fighting almost until the very end. The night before had seemed completely normal. Juliana spent time with friends, worked her shift, and returned home. Later that evening, her boyfriend John Gilmore called her. They spoke briefly. He mentioned going out for drinks with friends, and she told him she was fine. That was the last confirmed conversation anyone ever had with her. At 9:53 p.m., a neighbor reported hearing screams, loud movement, and furniture being dragged across the floor before everything suddenly went silent. When investigators later recovered Juliana's phone, they found something chilling. Someone had attempted to call 911 during the attack, but the call disconnected before it could connect to emergency services. She tried to get help, but whoever attacked her stopped the call before it went through. Juliana's body was not discovered until following day, March 16th. Her mother Patricia had been trying unsuccessfully to contact her, and after hearing nothing back, she called police. Officers arrived at Juliana's apartment and immediately sensed something was wrong. The front door was unlocked, and the moment they entered, they smelled natural gas filling the home. A candle burned on the coffee table. The apartment had effectively been turned into a bomb. Investigators later realized the killer had turned on the gas stove and lit the candle hoping the entire building would explode, destroying the scene and every piece of evidence inside. But the apartment building was older and poorly sealed. Air circulated through the structure differently than expected, preventing enough gas from building up for an explosion. If conditions had changed even slightly, the entire crime scene could have disappeared forever. Inside the bedroom, officers found Juliana Redding dead. Detectives from the Santa Monica Police Department immediately noticed something unusual about the scene. DNA was everywhere. Not a small amount, not a few isolated traces. It covered the apartment. Later, Prosecutor Alan Jackson said that in nearly 2 decades of prosecuting murder cases, he had never seen anything comparable. DNA appeared on the apartment door lock, on dishes in the sink, on the stove knob used to release the gas, on Juliana's clothing, and most importantly, on her throat. That final detail became central to the investigation because it directly connected physical contact to the act of strangulation itself. As detectives reconstructed the timeline, the sequence became horrifyingly clear. At 9:53 p.m., neighbors heard screams. At some point during the struggle, Juliana tried calling 911. After she was killed, the scene was staged to explode. Whoever murdered her expected the fire and gas blast to erase every answer investigators would later search for. At first, detectives focused on the people closest to Juliana. Her father, Greg, immediately pointed investigators toward her boyfriend, John Gilmore, whom he had never trusted. Greg described past incidents involving anger and arguments between the couple, including one occasion where Gilmore allegedly kicked in Juliana's car door during a drunken outburst. Police questioned Gilmore extensively. He admitted visiting Juliana's apartment the morning after the attack, before anyone publicly knew she had died. He claimed he looked through the security door and noticed a candle still burning inside. Investigators tested his DNA. Eventually, he was eliminated as a suspect. Police then tested dozens of additional people connected to Juliana, including women she knew personally. Nothing matched. The investigation stalled until detectives returned to connection between Juliana's father and Dr. Munir Uwaydah. That's when everything began shifting. According to prosecutors, the motive for the murder started with a business deal involving pharmaceutical pain creams. After Juliana introduced Greg Redding to Uwaydah, the two men entered a financial arrangement tied to the doctor's medical business. At first, the deal appeared legitimate. Then Greg became suspicious. Something about the operation didn't feel right to him, and on March 10, 2008, only 5 days before Juliana's murder, Greg formally withdrew from the business agreement in writing. Prosecutors believe Uwaydah viewed the decision as a betrayal. That's when another name entered the story: Kelly Sue Park. Officially, Park worked as Uwaydah's real estate broker, assistant, and financial manager, but investigators believe her role went much deeper than business. Uwaydah reportedly referred to her as his James Bond. Prosecutors argued Park handled intimidation and confrontations for him whenever disputes arose. Court documents later described accusations involving threats, pressure tactics, and aggressive behavior connected to financial disagreements. Investigators began to suspect Juliana herself may never have been the intended target. Instead, prosecutors believed she became caught in the middle of a dispute involving her father. According to the prosecution's theory, Kelly Sue Park went to Juliana's apartment on March 15th, intending to send a message tied to Greg Redding's decision to leave the business arrangement. But something escalated, and Juliana fought back. Financial records only deepened investigators' suspicions. 3 weeks before Juliana's murder, Park reportedly received $250,000. Over the following 18 months, prosecutors said more than $1 million was transferred to her from accounts connected to Uwaydah. The amounts were staggering and far beyond what investigators considered normal compensation for real estate work. Still, it took nearly 2 years before an arrest was finally made. On March 17, 2010, Kelly Sue Park was arrested and charged in connection with Juliana Redding's murder. Her bail was set at $3.5 million. But one major figure never faced charges. Dr. Munir Uwaydah left the country shortly after Park's arrest and did not return for the trial. That absence would hang over the entire case. Detective Karen Thompson, who had worked the investigation from the beginning, eventually made the breakthrough that tied everything together. The unknown DNA found throughout Juliana's apartment finally matched Kelly Sue Park. The match was overwhelming. Park's DNA appeared on the apartment lock, inside the kitchen, on the gas stove knob, on Juliana's phone, and most disturbingly, on Juliana's neck. The attacker had physically left behind biological evidence during the strangulation itself. To investigators, it felt definitive. Even prosecutor Alan Jackson later said he had never encountered a homicide case with that much DNA evidence pointing toward one person. But overwhelming evidence does not always guarantee a conviction. Kelly Sue Park's trial began in 2013 and quickly attracted national attention. The case contained everything that captures public fascination. A young, beautiful victim, Los Angeles wealth and influence, a missing doctor who had fled the country, and a female defendant tied to an enormous amount of forensic evidence. Prosecutors argued Park had been sent to Juliana's apartment to intimidate her over her father's business dispute with Uwaydah. They claimed the confrontation spiraled into violence and ended with Park strangling Juliana to death before attempting to destroy the crime scene with gas and fire. The defense focused on reasonable doubt. Park's attorney admitted the DNA existed, but argued that evidence alone did not conclusively prove murder. He challenged the timeline, questioned the prosecution's interpretation of events, and argued Park physically could not have overpowered Juliana alone. There was another major issue. Prosecutors were not allowed to fully present the broader theory involving Dr. Uwaydah and the alleged criminal network surrounding him. So the jury mainly saw a technical forensic case without the wider context investigators believed explained the motive. Expert witnesses spent days explaining the DNA evidence, the injuries, and the forensic findings. Financial records connected to Park were also introduced. But despite everything, reasonable doubt remained enough. On June 4th, 2013, the jury returned its verdict. Not guilty of first-degree murder. Not guilty of second-degree murder. Kelly Sue Park broke down in tears. Inside the courtroom, emotions exploded. People shouted from the gallery. Some cried openly. Others accused Park directly as she walked free. For Juliana's family, it was devastating. They left court without convictions, without closure, and without the justice they believed the evidence clearly supported. Even some defense experts reportedly expressed surprise at the outcome, and it leaves behind a difficult question. If that amount of DNA evidence wasn't enough to convict someone, what would have been? No one has ever been convicted for Juliana Redding's murder. Years later, reports suggested Dr. Uwaydah had been arrested in Germany, though details remained unclear. Around the same time, Kelly Sue Park faced new fraud charges tied to a massive medical insurance scheme allegedly connected to Uwaydah's operations in Southern California. Investigators claimed the fraud involved nearly $150 million and led to indictments against 15 people. But none of it changed Juliana's case. Once Park was acquitted, double jeopardy protections meant She could never be tried again for Juliana's murder. That chapter was legally closed forever. Meanwhile, Uwaydah's medical career eventually collapsed. California medical authorities placed him on probation in 2010 over allegations involving unsupervised surgeries performed by a physician's assistant. By 2013, his medical license had been revoked completely, but none of it brought Juliana back. Her funeral was held on March 28, 2008, at St. Odelia Catholic Church in Tucson. She was buried in the city where she grew up, surrounded by the family and friends who loved her most. Over time, the case became widely discussed in legal and forensic circles because it exposed something unsettling about the justice system. The science worked. DNA identified someone. It placed that person at the scene. It told investigators a story. But it still wasn't enough to secure a conviction beyond reasonable doubt. And that gap, the distance between evidence and certainty, is where Juliana Redding's case still remains today. The Santa Monica Police Department continues asking anyone with information to come forward. The evidence still exists. The DNA profile still exists. And somewhere inside that evidence is a story that many people believe never received a true ending.